this happens to us quite a bit, so there's schools that will have they'll do an owl segment, or they're working on a bird of prey unit or some sort of environmental unit, and as a nice little reward for the end of their long studying and research and stuff, they usually kind of bring us in, and then we kind of just reiterate some of the things that they learn. And it reaches over to the snake who's sitting there, and it reaches over nice and slow and does this. That's not nice. And then it reaches back and goes. Now, our rattlesnake will start to shake its tail, warning that red tail, don't mess with me. And the red tail will just keep going, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Now the rattlesnake is upset, and it's just sitting there going whack, whack, and then it strikes. And when it strikes, it grabs on to the first thing it can get a hold of, which is this, feathers. There's no blood in feathers. So the poison, if it gets into the feathers, it ain't going to do anything. The blood supply on this bird actually starts right about here. And now this is perfect because the red tail now has that head occupied, and then it can reach over and get a hold of the head. Rattlesnake lunch. This is an awesome rattlesnake killing machine. It's a scene, an adventure, an experience that ingrains itself in your brain. And if you have a positive experience with it from a very young age, later on in life, you are more apt to want to protect or learn or study or anything with that.
It's a hummingbird.
This is, no, that's not hummingbirds. No. If hummingbirds were this big, they would probably feed off us. They'd stick their beak in our head. I had experiences with birds, and I also had mentors, and people like my grandmother, my grandfather. And they were great teachers and stuff. So, unfortunately, that doesn't happen a lot anymore. Whereas as a matter of fact, there's a name for it. It's nature deficit disorder is what they're calling it. So there's a whole generation of people who grew up outdoors and knowing those basics of hawks and fish and eagles. This is just not common knowledge anymore. There was a group, we grew up playing around outside, but we don't see that too much. So, in a way, we're just kind of trying to bring that back into people's lives. So when birds of prey eat, and actually when most birds eat, if a bird eats something that it cannot digest, if it actually ingests it, and that could be fur, that could be bone, that could be the hulls from seeds, if they swallow seeds whole, if they can't digest it, later on, after all the stuff that they want out of it is digested, and the stuff that can't be digested, later on, that is forced out. It's regurgitated into what they call a casting. But they also call them pellets. I've never seen him do that on a program, and I know people that would die to see that. All our birds cast. All of them cast. We just don't really see them do it. You feed a bird, you come back the next day, there's a pellet on the ground, you feed the bird. So for them to actually cast in front of you is rare. For the bald eagle to cast in front of a group of people, I've never seen that before. So it's not a rare thing that he does, but I've never seen him do it in front of a group of people. So we were talking about castings, but they actually got to see one in action. So it was pretty neat. There's rocks in here, and so I don't think a lot of people realize that birds actually ingest rocks. So the rocks actually help aid in digestion. So they have these very muscular stomachs, but very, very few digestive enzymes in there. So the rocks, in conjunction with that muscular stomach, help squeeze and grind food up. And so they ingest rocks to help them. We actually have a name for this in our job. It's called wrangle. And if you've ever been at one of our outdoor facilities for birds, you'll notice that there's 6 inches of pea gravel in the base of every mew. That is their, one, to help drain stuff out for cleanliness, but two, it provides wrangle, because all birds need wrangle. So they all eat rocks. They all cough up rocks later on, which is really neat, because if you ever see dinosaur, there's this big story about dinosaurs and birds and the connection, but you'll see dinosaur fossils, and where that stomach should be in the fossil, there's rocks. And some people, kids are excited at just seeing the level of excitement because they were constantly moving. And some people might get upset at that, but to know that I say something and they're still talking about it, even though they may not be paying attention, some of the teachers are like, oh, they're not paying attention, but they were. They just couldn't stop talking about stuff. This was a neat group because they were like taking the stuff in and they had to talk about it. and then take something else in. So I just love seeing that dynamic with groups, but it was a fun group.